profit, that is valuation, that is something which we can at the that is the numerical part, so that we can do at the end, and that way it will work out better. So today what we'll do is we'll look at, so last time, remember, we were talking about bonuses and splits and that sort of thing. So today what we'll do
Right.
is we'll look at the dividend decision made by the company. So what exactly, see, companies have to pay dividends to their shareholders. Please remember always that there are two aspects to a dividend decision. One aspect is that whenever you pay a dividend, who gets the highest dividend? Vivek and Dipti, who will get the highest dividend in terms of money?
Promoters.
The
Equity
promoter.
shareholder.
But within that equity shareholder, the promoter, you see, the promoter is that small group which has a very large percentage of the shares. So you look at it in practical terms. See, what happens is that the promoter, let's say that he has, just take a case where he has 60% of the shares. Okay, so he has 60% of the shares. The remaining 40% are in the hands of let's say thousands, lakhs of shareholders, big company. Now the company, when it decides to give a dividend, let's say that it decides to give 500 crores as dividend. Out of that 500 crores, 300 crores will go, 60% will go to the promoters themselves. So please remember that it is a huge, huge amount. Huge amounts of money are involved when the promoter is concerned. When it comes to the equity shareholders, probably most equity shareholders will have very small holdings. So their share of the dividend is in hundreds, 700, 800 rupees. That's about all. I personally, I'm telling you from my own experience. As a retail investor, it is very rarely that I have got a dividend which is more than, let's say, 999 rupees. Everything is below 1000. Because, but
Correct.
the promoters, they get huge dividends. So when we talk about dividend decisions today, remember this: they are the owners of the company. They are the people who actually manage the company. They have huge influence in in the decision itself, in the decision making, and they stand to gain the most when a dividend is made. So in the eyes of the promoter, there is always a very, what shall I say, there is this temptation to have large dividend payouts. So we will look at this and try to understand how this actually works. So let's start with this dividend decisions. And after we finish dividend decisions, we will continue with another part, which is the cost of capital. Now, what is dividend? This you understand. In this, dividend is the share of the profit which is given to investors, the equity shareholders. Investors are the equity shareholders, and dividend is the share of profit which is given to them. Now, the actual payout, see, the amount of dividend that you give to the equity shareholder, that is referred to as a payout. So it is called a cash payout. So a cash payout made by a company from its profits to its investors is known as a dividend. Other thing, please note, a dividend can only be paid from profit. You cannot take a loan and pay dividend. Take. The proportion of the profit that is to be distributed is to be decided by the management of the company. This is the point I was making earlier. Now, is this dividend relevant? Then this question comes, is it relevant? So the dividend irrelevance theory, there is a theory like this. Dividend is not relevant, states that dividend is not relevant for investors as they have the option of selling some of their shares in the market to generate cash if they need funds. Market behavior shows that dividend payouts minimally affect share price. So basically, what this particular theory is saying is, if a company, whether a company gives a dividend or a company does not give a dividend, the share price is not really affected. The share price remains steady. That means the demand for the shares of the company remains steady, assuming the company is doing well, even if dividend is not paid. Why does this happen? Because if the company is a good company, investors are looking at future increase in the price of the share. Remember, whenever you buy a share, you are buying the share because you feel that in the days to come, the company will do better. The company will do better. There will be a greater demand for its shares and the market price of those shares will go up. Therefore, you will be able to sell your shares in the market at a much, much higher price. The dividend that you get is always a very, very small amount, because dividend is the percentage of dividend is set on the book value of the share. Dipti, you will have a better idea of this. I think you should be appreciating this better, that the book value and the market value. Can you just say a few words on this, Dipti?
So book value and the market value are different things from each other. Like, for example, if an asset in a company is there, say machine.
No,
So
I'm not talking about that, Dipti. The book value of the share and the market value of the share.
the book value is the that on the price which the share is purchased, or and the market value, the current value of the share on which it may um, change from time to time or situation to situation.
So if you take the case of a good company, let's say the value of its book value of its share is 10 rupees. I'll give you examples right now. I'll show you some good companies. Sometimes the book value of the share is rupees 1. The book value of some company shares are rupees 10. It may be 100, it may be more, that is different. But there are
Yes.
a large number of companies which have very low book values. Now, when a dividend decision is taken, you say that I will pay 50% of, see, of the book value. If that is the amount of share that I make, that actually somebody, if somebody had bought, let's say, a 1 rupee share, and if a 50% payout is made, he will get 50 paise. That is the amount which he will end up getting. But somebody who bought that 1 rupee share for 300 rupees at the current market price, what will he get? He is going to get a very, very small percentage of his when you compare it with the market price. That is the point I'm trying to make. The percentage which the company declares is on the basis of its book value, but the current market price is much, much, much higher than the book value, 30 times, 40 times, sometimes 100 times. Therefore, if somebody invests in a company's in a share and hopes to make some return on the dividend, it's very foolish to think like that. You will only be able to make money with a share if you are able to sell that share at a higher price. You will never make money on dividends. Please understand this. Now, what the dividend irrelevance theory is saying basically is that the dividend payouts minimally affect share price because people are buying at the market price. Even if you give a 50% dividend in terms of actual money, it is a very, very small amount per share. Okay. So basically what happens is that the investor is not actually interested in the dividend. He is interested in how well this company is doing. How will it perform in the future? Am I making sense, Diti? Are you getting what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
See, we'll have a look again at this. But dividend paid is income for shareholders, and the bigger shareholders are the owners of the company. See, the owner of the company, his shares are all bought at book value because he is the person who issued the shares. Everybody, see, just imagine that a share is a 1 rupee share, a 10 rupee share, let us say, is issued to someone, is issued in the market when the IPO comes. That 10 rupee book value share is issued at a premium of 30 rupees. That means the price of the share is 40. You take the case of my bank, Punjab National Bank. When PNB came out with its first IPO, at that point of time, the book value of our share was rupees 10. The book value was 10, but when we issued in the market, we took a share premium of 30 rupees. So that means that 10 rupee share, shareholders bought that 10 rupee share for rupees 40. Now, whatever dividend is declared as a percentage of 10 and as a percentage of 40, look at the difference. Suppose you give a 5 rupee dividend. Somebody bought the share for 10 rupees. So for every 10 rupee share, he is getting 5 rupees. And the fellow who bought it for 40 rupees, he is getting 5 rupees for 40, for on an investment of 40. So basically what happens here is that the person who buys the share in the open market at the current market price, he doesn't really make too much money on the basis of dividends. He is more interested in the company continuing to do well so that the market value of its shares continues to increase. And in that way, he wants to see the share price rising. See, he wants to see the demand for the company shares rising, share price rising, and he can then sell his shares at a high profit. The only person who makes a good bit of money on a dividend are basically its largest shareholders. This is one point now which I wanted you to understand. The other thing is that most companies view a dividend policy as an integral part of their corporate strategy. Management must decide on the dividend amount, timing, and various other factors that influence dividend payment. So let's look at these other factors. What are the factors that actually influence dividend payments? So first factor, maintenance of reserves. So what are the reserves? Vivek, can you remember what are the reserves? Prerna, are you with us?
Yes, sir.
So the reserves you have, do you remember anything about this, or do you know what this is actually, the reserves?
Sir, actually, I missed the last class due to some sort of network issue.
Yes, I remember that. So just for your benefit, the reserves are the accumulated profits of the company. Every year, when the company makes profits, it retains a part of its profits and it keeps it as a fund to basically finance its own expansion. And that fund is referred to as the reserves. Now, there can be funds of this sort or reserves of this sort for different purposes if the company has to function smoothly. So, for example, there can be reserves for replacing assets. What I am referring to here is depreciation, for working capital, for bad debts, for dividend equalization, for expansion, for taxation, for debenture redemption. That means if a redemption of debentures is going to be made sometime in the future, you may want to put money aside from your profits, create a fund from which you can pay your debenture holders when their debenture matures or when the bond matures. And preference share redemption are very common for a company to keep apart. The surplus is available for dividend. That means After all these different needs of the company are taken care of, only then whatever remains, only that is available for the dividend. Now, a company cannot pay dividends out of capital. See, like we said earlier, dividend can only be paid from your current year's profits or the accumulated profits of a company, sometimes from reserves. It can be paid after providing for depreciation as per Companies Act. You have to provide for depreciation in any case. And remember, depreciation is an expense. So when you provide for depreciation, basically you reduce the profits. The third thing is that cash position is a big criterion to pay dividend. For a company, cash is needed for various contingencies. They cannot be ignored for the survival of a company. For example, you need cash to pay your bills, to pay the employees who work with you, to pay the rent, to pay for raw materials, to pay for your marketing. Cash is required at every stage. So if you don't have sufficient cash to pay the dividend, then you cannot actually pay dividends. This is another very, very important part. So dividend policy has to be made after a serious consideration of the cash position of the company. Then, next point here, there is a need for growth and expansion. So company quite likely is brought into being not to remain static. It is to grow and expand. Any company, see, if a company does not grow, probably it will not survive. One of the things is in a competition is everybody is trying to do better than the other person. So if a company decides to like suddenly rest, I've made a lot of money in the last few years, I can now sort of take it easy, let me just be happy with what I have. That doesn't work. In the world of let's say in capitalism as such, basically what happens is everybody has to keep moving and trying to move as fast as they can. Very, very few companies, if any, actually have the luxury of saying that no, we don't want to grow this year, we are going to remain at a steady level, we are already quite good. Maybe some companies which have access to some unique natural resources which other companies don't have. Let's say you have a company like De Beers which sells diamonds. It has diamond mines in Africa. Now, it is possible that if De Beers tomorrow decides that I want to reduce my growth rate, it will not really matter. But any other company, if it takes this decision not to actually grow and to remain static, to remain at the same level, the chances are that it will not survive. So this is one thing which you have to always remember. Then you need to have money always for expansion. See, if you want to grow, that means you have to keep investing more. When you invest more, only then can you grow. And for that, you need money. That means that the profits that you make, some part of that profit, in fact, a larger part of that profit has to be retained within the company so that it can be invested in some of the processes of the company and so that the company can actually grow. If you don't do this, you will restrict the scope for growth and expansion. Now, there are many companies which simply take the view that we are going to have a very orthodox dividend policy. That means we are not going to pay very high dividends. And we will take whatever profits we have and we'll keep putting it back into the business. We will keep growing the business. And their view is that if the business grows, tomorrow our profits will be higher. Therefore, we will be able to give you more dividend. See, if I make more profits, then I can give you more dividend. I'll give you an example later on to make this clearer. Then the government taxation policy. See, corporate taxation is a very important factor to take into consideration. Government levies huge amount of taxes on companies. This means that management is put into difficulty in maintaining stable or high rate of dividend. This has to be considered while formulating dividend policy. Because remember, what happens is that if the government is taking away, let's say, 40% of your profits, then whatever remains, only from that you will be able to pay dividends. So if the government has a very high taxation policy, the amount left with you to pay dividends is less. This is the relevance of the taxation policy. Let's say the government had a very liberal taxation policy. You earn how much you want, we'll just take 10% of your earnings. कंपनी 100 रुपए कमाती है, 10 रुपए सरकार लेती है, 90 उसके पास रह गए. They are in a position to give 45 rupees as dividend. But if a company earns 100 rupees and the company and the government takes away 40, it is now left with only 60. It can't give 45 as dividend. अगर वो 45 रुपए 60 में से दे दिया डिविडेंड में, तो सिर्फ 15 रुपए बच जाते हैं उसके पास अपने एक्सपेंशन के लिए. दैट इज नॉट समथिंग which will be viable for the company. So the taxation policy is another very, very important thing. Then a company which has taken a large amount of loans, and banks are involved and institutional creditors are involved, big, powerful people from which you have taken money and from whom you may want to take money in the future also. If that has happened, then in that case, they will dictate you do not give very high dividends. Because as far as the creditor is concerned, he has put money into your company. He wants your company to keep, doing well. It wants the company to have a strong financial position so that the company is in a position to repay its loans. आप खुद सोचिए, if profits होती है कंपनी की और उन प्रॉफिट्स में से अगर एक बड़ा हिस्सा चला जाता है शेयर होल्डर्स को डिविडेंड के रूप में, तो कंपनी के पास एक्सपेंशन के लायक बहुत कम पैसा बचता है. एंड इफ दैट इज द केस, then the company will not be able to actually compete in the market. It needs money. Money is always there. Otherwise, the option is that you give a huge dividend. आपके पास पैसे कम हो गए. Now you still need money for running the company, and now you are forced to borrow money. So if you borrow money now, that cost may be very high and it may create more trouble for you. Then fixed asset replacement provision. Let's रेट्स हमारे बहुत हाई है इकोनॉमी में. आज जिस मशीन की कीमत 1 लाख रुपए है, कल होके इसी की कीमत हो सकता है कि 2 लाख हो जाए बिकॉज ऑफ हाई इन्फ्लेशन. एक जनरल इंक्रीज इन कॉस्ट तो होता ही है. रॉ मटेरियल्स एंड अदर थिंग्स एक्चुअली इंक्रीज, their value increases, cost increases, so those things are already there. Now if it is inflationary, the cost is going to go even higher. If that happens, then whenever an asset has to be replaced, think of a machine that has become old. Machine has become old, it requires to be replaced. There is an inflationary economy. Now the cost of that replacement machine is very high. Now in that case, I will have to make, where will I get this money? ये पैसे कहाँ से आएंगे to replace the asset? So it is better for me to basically, have a very high rate of depreciation. मतलब अगर let's say that a value of an asset, just for the sake of मतलब clarity, take a round figure. Let's say a machine costs 1 crore rupees. You say that the life of this machine is 10 years. Then what will be the amount you will provide every year, Dipti? The life of the machine is 10 years. The cost of the machine is 1 crore. So what will be the amount you will provide every year? It will be basically 10 lakhs. So in 10 years, you will again manage to get back 1 crore and you have a fund with you to replace the machine. But think of a situation where after 10 years, the cost of that machine has increased from 1 lakh to 2,50,000. You have created a provision only of through depreciation. You have reduced your profits only to the extent of 1 crore. And now when the time comes to replace, you find that the cost of this new machine is 2.5 crores. You have a problem. Where will you get this money? So it is necessary for you to have higher rates of depreciation also. So instead of having a depreciation of only 10 lakhs, maybe you should think in having a depreciation of something like 25 lakhs. And every year providing that much. And you will have to make a fixed asset replacement provision, and you will have to keep putting money into this so that when the time comes for replacing that machine, you are in a better position with funds. So this, if you have a higher rate of depreciation, the direct impact on dividends will be that you will have lower profits. If you have lower profits, because depreciation is an expense, profits is what? Income minus expense. And if I have a higher depreciation, my expense is higher. If my expense is higher, then my profits are less. So essentially, if I have less profits, I'll be able to pay less dividend. So if the economy is inflationary, the chances are that dividends will not be very high. Now, see, ultimately what happens is that the dividend decision involves balancing the shareholders' desire for dividends and the need for growth. This is the basic thing. In theory, the objective of a dividend policy should be to maximize the shareholders' return so that the value of his investment is maximized. So what does this mean? The objective of a dividend policy should be to maximize the shareholders' return. Shareholders, when will the return of the shareholders be maximized? When the company really does well. When the company does well, when will the company do well? When the company will be able to expand, when the company will be able to take advantage of the opportunities in the market. All those things require funds. And if those things require funds, it may be more prudent to have lower dividends. And as far as the shareholder is concerned, giving a low dividend does not mean that he is getting less value. Because the shareholder's return consists of two elements. There is dividend and there is capital gain. Capital gain is the extra money that you get when the value of the share rises, share price rises, and you sell at that higher price. So dividend policy affects both growth, return into equity into retention ratio. A low payout ratio might produce a higher share price because it accelerates earnings growth. Earnings growth means more profits. If you have a low payout ratio and you are in a position to invest more in your company, it is likely that you will get a better return or more profits in the future. Investors of growth companies realize their growth mostly through capital gains resulting from appreciation in share value. So, जो invest करता है growth companies में, he is not hoping to make a lot of money from the dividends. He is looking to make money, a huge amount of money, from the appreciation in the price of the shares. Share prices increase करेंगे, he will make money. Flip side of the low payout policy is that capital gains occur in the distant future. The disadvantage of having a low payout policy, उसमें क्या होता है कि you will immediately not get any money and the capital gain will happen much later in the future. But like I said, most of us are very small shareholders. And the amount of money that we get from dividends is not very high in any case. Therefore, for the smaller shareholder, it is probably better that a company keeps putting its profits into its own growth and expanding so that tomorrow it becomes a more valuable company, the prices of its shares increase, and whatever shares I have, I am able to sell it at a much, much higher price. That is the advantage in a low payout policy. Okay, so please try to understand that low payout policy is not something which is necessarily bad. So it may not necessarily result in high price of shares. This is a risk. Suppose there is a low payout policy. Now you are taking the money and you are putting it into the company so that the company, you are trying to expand. And let's say that you are not so successful. If that happens, then what will happen is that the market will not have a very good view about your company and the share prices may not be as high as you would have expected because the demand for the shares is not there. Why is the demand not there? Because the company is not doing as well as it could have. So the other problem is कि it is difficult to identify the effect of payout on price. इस पे बहुत research हुआ है. And people who are experts in this have tried to see if there is a relation directly between the payout ratio, मतलब हम कितने % retain करते हैं, कितने % हम दे देते हैं, and the price or in the market price. And there is no easy correlation between these two. Now look at this. This is an extract from one of my management book where it is giving you in the first box here, you have a high payout company. ये 20 साल का period है. और इसके नीचे there is a low payout company. And this is also a 20-year period. इन दोनों में ना, please note the difference. दोनों companies, when they started, the book value of their shares was 100. 100 रुपये था इनका. उसके बाद market price भी assume कीजिए कि at that time, when the company starts, market price भी 100 है, it is not taking any premium, और इसका book value भी 100 है. इसको profits होता है 20 रुपये. ये dividend देती है 16 रुपये. And that means कि 80% ये dividend दे रही है. और 4 रुपये ये retain करती है. So let's say the person who has invested, he is very happy for 100 rupees, I am getting 16. Now next year, the company equity का value बढ़ जाता है, it becomes 104. And its earnings remain at 20%, it gets 20 rupees 80 paise. Dividend also remains at 80%, तो 16 रुपये 64 पैसे dividends हो गए. Retained earnings is 416. Now, if you look at this, what you will notice is that जो equity के जो market prices हैं, उसका growth बहुत बहुत धीमा है. So from 100 it goes to 104, 208, 12, 16. यहाँ पे थोड़ा 5 से लेके 10 साल के बीच में only it reaches 142, then 173. After 20 years, it is reaching 210. Now, why is this happening? Because जो investors हैं, they are feeling that the company is not investing in itself. वो अपने strengths को और बढ़ाने के लिए जो पैसे चाहिए, वो नहीं invest कर रही है. They are taking the money out of the company. देखिए, जब भी आप dividend देते हैं, what are you doing? You are taking money and you are moving it out of the company, giving it back to shareholders. आपके पास में कम है. Therefore, your chances of actually growing are less. Now, the other company, the low payout company, उसका देखिए same profit we are assuming is also 20% for that company, for the low payout company. इसकी shares की कीमत भी 100 रुपये थी जब ये मार्केट में आई थी, और 20 रुपये का प्रॉफिट हुआ they gave a dividend of only 4 rupees. That means they gave a 20% dividend. इनका पॉलिसी है कि हम 20% से ज्यादा डिविडेंड हम नहीं देंगे. 16 रुपीज इज रिटेन्ड. 16 रुपये ये रिटेन कर लेते हैं अपने पास. अगले साल इसका वैल्यू, ये वाला जो वैल्यू है, दिस इंक्रीसेस. This increases for the simple reason that the market is seeing that this company, इसका जो reserves है, that is increasing. तो वो reserves जो ज्यादा है उसके चलते what is happening is that the value of the equity is increasing. Net worth उसकी ज्यादा रहेगी ना. अगर उसका reserves ज्यादा होगा, its net worth will also be more. That is getting reflected in its share price. Now, इस साइड में 20% में भी it is now giving, it is earning 2320. Dividend ये दे रहा है 464. Retained earnings है 1856. Third year, again there is a jump in the price of the share. Why is the price increasing? Because reserves बढ़ रहे हैं. Since the reserves are increasing, therefore the value of the share will be higher. अब total value company का ले लो, divide by the number of shares, you will get your answer. Now, by the end of the 20th year, assuming that the company continues to make a 20% growth, and this is not something which is just too much. There are many, many very good companies. You take Asian Paints, consistently above 20%. HDFC Bank had a 20% growth consistent for so long. Now, in this case, what is happening? This company will find that its price per share has gone up to 1677 rupees in 20 years, much, much more than the 210 which the other company had. Why is this happening? Because the retained earnings are more, the reserves are more. The other interesting thing is, even at a low percentage of dividend, even at a low percentage, you will see that from the 15th year onwards, this company, the low payout company, is actually giving more dividend than the high payout company. Even though it is giving only 20%. Matlab the high payout company, even after giving 80% dividend, in actual rupee terms, it is giving only 27 rupees 71 as dividend. But the low payout company, even at 20%, is giving a dividend of 31 rupees 95. What does it need from the point of view of the investor? It requires patience. So a person who invested, if an investor had invested at this rate, at 100, and he is able to wait for these 15 years, he will make almost 8 times his money. This is the reason why people say that invest in a good company and stay invested. Don't keep, taking your money out and trying to earn short-term profits. What do you say, Vivek, about this?
Yeah, means these things really matters about the company. Even just I was scrolling the chart period. Recently, I saw the future consumers, it come again inside the market. It's not like that there is some certain criteria. That's why company is not performing well. Even in initial you told कि more profit, more dividend, but according to their financial year.
According to their financial need. See, if you neglect your needs to expand, to grow, and you take that money and give it out as dividends just to, get the praise of some shareholders, or maybe because the promoters are putting pressure on you that, look, we want our money back, give us big dividends. Then in that case, you are playing with the future of the company. The future growth of the company will not be there. See, any company, आप एक finance company को ले लीजिए. If it doesn't have money, वो fresh loans कहाँ से देगी? It can't give
Correct.
loans. And if it doesn't give fresh loans, how will it increase its profits? And it is not possible to borrow money. Na? You cannot always borrow money to do your business. That is a very, very risky game. Borrowing money to do business, because once you borrow, you are expected to meet the terms and conditions of the loan agreement. You have to pay back exactly when the agreement says you have to pay. And if you do not have the cash flow at that time, your reputation is at stake. आपको दिक्कत बहुत हो सकती है. इसलिए if you have, see, आपके पास जो सबसे बड़ा सोर्स है कैपिटल का, that is internal. आपके जो अपने प्रॉफिट्स हैं, that is the biggest source of internal revenue accrual that you have. और वो जो है उसको अगर आप यूज करते हैं तो कोई पूछने वाला नहीं है एक्सेप्ट योर ओन बोर्ड. और अगर आप सही दिशा में लेके चल रहे हैं कंपनी को, इन द लॉन्ग रन ग्रोथ इसी तरह की होगी जैसे इन कंपनीज की है. आप अगर कुछ, देयर आर मेनी कंपनीज यू कैन लुक एट लेट्स से रिलैक्सो, लुक एट एशियन पेंट्स. इनका अगर आप शुरू से देखेंगे ना, यू विल सी दैट दीज कंपनीज हैव एक्चुअली अडॉप्टेड दिस सॉर्ट ऑफ पॉलिसी एंड दे हैव डन वेल. नाउ हाई पे आउट पॉलिसी में क्या होगा? जस्ट टू रिकैप, मोर करंट डिविडेंड्स, लेस रिटेन्ड अर्निंग्स. कंपनी में पैसे कम रहेंगे, इसके चलते क्या होगा? स्लोअर ग्रोथ, लोअर मार्केट प्राइस पर शेयर. Dividends are current earnings and can be taxed at a higher rate than capital gains. ये भी याद रखिए. The people who get the dividends, they will be paying higher taxes. People who, because capital gains वाला जो rate है, it is less than the rate for current earnings. So it is a very difficult decision for the company, ये वाला जो है. Because there are many stakeholders whose interests are at play. जो एवरेज शेयर होल्डर है, जो रिटेल छोटा वाला है, he probably is not interested in the dividend. Who is interested in the dividend? The promoter. Because bulk में पैसे किसको मिलेंगे? The promoters are the persons who will get those hundreds of crores. So if an investment is to be made from the profits at the cost of giving dividends, the dilemma is which to prefer. मतलब आपके सामने दो रास्ते हैं. आपको इन्वेस्टमेंट करना है अपने कंपनी में और आपको लोगों को खुश भी रखना है. वन इज अ शॉर्ट टर्म थिंग, वन इज अ लॉन्ग टर्म थिंग. सो जो मैनेजमेंट कंपनी की है उसके सामने दिस टाइट रोप वॉक इज देयर. हाउ डू आई कीप माई प्रोमोटर्स हैप्पी ऑल्सो, and how do I also manage to keep this company going at a good speed and growing well? Company pays dividends, it may have to raise funds to make the investment. Investment उनको उसको करना ही है अपने कंपनी को एक्सपैंड कराने के लिए. डिविडेंड्स अगर वो दे देती है तो पैसे निकल गए, जो अवेलेबल पैसा था. अब वो पैसे कहाँ से आएंगे? अब या तो वो फिर से इक्विटी ले, फ्रेश इक्विटी, or alternatively it borrows the money, which has a cost and which can create further problems. So there is a trade-off between retained earnings and issuing new shares. या तो ये या वो. Trade-off होता है कि if you decide on one course, you will have to give up the other course. दोनों चीज, दोनों हाथ में लड्डू नहीं पहुंच सकते. Simple. So this is the low payout वाले को क्या फायदा है? In a low payout policy, the dividends are initially low, resulting in larger retained earnings. जो उस example में हमने देखा. Larger retained earnings means that there will be more investment, and this will result in higher profits. Even a small payout ratio will result in a larger dividend. 15 साल 20 साल के बाद इनका अपना प्रॉफिट्स इतना ज्यादा हो जाएगा कि अगर percentage of dividend is less, the rupee amount of the dividend will still be very high. तो होता है इसमें क्या है कि in a low payout policy the dividends are initially low, but in the long run the amount of dividend will increase. अगर कंपनी के हित को आप देखिएगा तो probably the low payout policy is better, but it is not that simple. There are always stakeholders, shareholders who will demand dividends because it is in their interest. It may not be in the interest of the company, but it is in their interests. Here now, अब ये देखिए 2020 के हैं ये फिगर्स, 3-4 साल पुराना है, but it gives you an idea. All are 6 large Indian companies: Britannia, Century Mills, Asian Paints, Tata Motors. मैरिको कौन सी कंपनी है, किसी को, एनीबडी?
I think biscuit and all those things.
ज्यादा उसका सिग्नेचर प्रोडक्ट एक है पैराशूट.
Parachute.
हाँ, पैराशूट
Yeah,
कोकोनट ऑयल
parachute. Parachute coconut oil.
एंड अपोलो टायर्स. ठीक है. नाउ दीज आर 6 कंपनीज. इनका आप देखिए कैसे करके, लुक एट द कैपिटल स्ट्रक्चर. इनका इसका आप देखिए, इक्विटी शेयर कैपिटल ब्रिटानिया का है 24 करोड़. इसके टोटल शेयर होल्डर्स फंड्स इज 2,400 crores. दैट मीन इन दोनों के बीच में जो फर्क है दैट इज रिजर्व्स. मैंने अगर 24 crores मेरा कैपिटल है तो रफली ऑलमोस्ट 2,400 इज माई रिजर्व्स. Borrowings है about 700 crores. Debt equity ratio is 0.29. ठीक है, मैंने 100 रुपए में 29 रुपए डेट है, 70 रुपए हमारा इक्विटी है. सेंचुरी मिल्स, इसका देखिए इक्विटी शेयर कैपिटल इज 111 crores. टोटल शेयर होल्डर्स फंड्स इज 3,919. दैट मीन्स इसके रिजर्व्स जो हैं that is close to 3,800 crores. Since the company began operating, they have built up their reserves to this high amount. ठीक है. लॉन्ग टर्म borrowings इसका बहुत ही कम है, 306 crore. Debt equity ratio is 0.08. That means 92 rupees is equity, 8 rupees is debt. Now, look at the difference in these two companies. Britannia, वो क्या करती है कि they have a 100% payout ratio. That means what are they doing? They are taking all their profits and giving it as dividend. They are not interested in, because इस कंपनी का अपना ब्रांड वैल्यू इतना ज्यादा है ब्रिटानिया का कि देयर प्रोडक्ट्स विल कंटिन्यू टू सेल. तो क्या होता है कि दे आर नॉट इंटरेस्टेड इन इन्वेस्टिंग इन रिसर्च एंड डेवलपमेंट और डूइंग समथिंग लाइक दैट. दूसरा, इट्स अ मल्टीनेशनल. अगर कुछ नई प्रोडक्ट्स अगर कहीं और इसके कोई किसी और यूनिट से आनी होगी तो आ जाएगी. जो इंडिया वाला यूनिट है दैट सिंपली गिव्स बैक टू इट्स शेयर होल्डर्स 100% of the profit. सेंचुरी, ये कंपनी आज भी दे आर वेरी वेरी इंटरेस्टेड इन एक्सपैंडिंग. इसके पास में वो ब्रिटानिया वाली बात नहीं है. इन दिस पर्टिकुलर ईयर इसका डिविडेंड था 0, और जितने प्रॉफिट्स इस कंपनी के हुए थे दैट इंटायर अमाउंट वाज रिटेन्ड हियर as part of their reserves. Asian Paints, इसका देखिए the actual equity share capital is 95. Asian Paints was set up in the 1950s. 13,350 crore है इसका shareholder funds. How did it become 13,350? Because these people have mostly had a generally low ratio शुरू से. And they have done so well with the expansion. Now they have the luxury of having a retention ratio of 45, 55 इन्होंने बांट दिए dividends. टाटा मोटर्स, दिस इज अ कैपिटल इंटेंसिव कंपनी, आपको दोनों चीज में दिखेंगे ये। 765 जो है इसका इक्विटी शेयर कैपिटल है, 14,000 इसका डेट, डेट इज मच 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 हायर, एंड इसके भी डिविडेंड्स 0, because this company is in a competition with Hyundai, it's in a competition with with Maruti. It needs money to keep improving the quality of its cars at all levels, design में, fuel efficiency में, इसका इलेक्ट्रिक मोटर्स का रेंज है, दे नीड टू कीप इन्वेस्टिंग। ये पैसे नहीं दे पा रहे, रिटेनिंग ऑल। मैरिको, मैरिको का देखिए पोजीशन बेटर है, कंज्यूमर गुड्स इंडस्ट्री, 129 करोड़ का इन्वेस्टमेंट, 3,000 करोड़ इसका शेयर होल्डर्स फंड्स, डेट मामूली 95 करोड़, 0.03, एंड इसका रिजल्ट क्या हो रहा है, गिविंग डिविडेंड पे आउट ऑफ 87। अपोलो, अपोलो का देखिए, द अदर, इट इज लाइक टाटा मोटर्स, अपोलो इज इन अ कॉम्पिटिशन अगेन, अपोलो इज इन अ कॉम्पिटिशन, अपोलो नीड्स मनी टू एक्सपैंड। बहुत सारे और अदर कंपनीज है, सियाट है, मिशेलिन है, ब्रिज वाटर है, सो ब्रिजस्टोन है, सॉरी, सो मेनी कंपनीज विच आर देयर। अगर इसको compete करना है, they have to keep improving the quality of their tires, come out with better quality of tires, better distribution arrangements, they need money. तो उसका रिजल्ट ये है कि ये अभी भी they are retaining their profits. ऐसा नहीं कि हर साल यही हुआ होगा, but broadly speaking, what you will see is that every company takes its own decision, कोई यूनिफॉर्मिटी इसमें नहीं होता है, एंड दैट डिसीजन इज बेस्ड ऑन द जनरल गुड ऑफ द कंपनी। रिमेंबर, ऑल दीज 6 कंपनीज आर कंपनीज विच हैव डन वेरी वेल, इसलिए दीज आर कंपनीज विच ऑलवेज लुक एट द फ्यूचर ऑफ देयर ओन कंपनीज, के अच्छी रहे, उसी तरह के एक्शन ये लेते हैं। तो दिस विल गिव यू सम आइडिया ऑफ द डिविडेंड डिसीजन। इसी क्रम में आई थॉट कि एक थ्योरेटिकल चीज भी आप लोगों को बता दें। एक इस पे कुछ रिसर्च, सब क्लासिकल रिसर्च है इसमें, डिविडेंड्स में, वॉल्टर्स मॉडल ऑफ डिविडेंड रेलेवेंस। तो इसका कहना है कि डिविडेंड डिसीजंस जो हैं, ये हमेशा, दिस विल ऑलवेज इफेक्ट द डिसीजन ऑफ द firm. The model is based on certain assumptions. क्या assumptions हैं? Internal financing. The firm finances all its investments through retained earnings. इसका मतलब ये है कि ये अपने, ये जो भी मॉडल्स बनते हैं ना इस तरह के, इसमें कुछ assumptions रखे जाते हैं right from the beginning. Assumptions इसमें क्या क्या है? एक assumption है कि कंपनी को अगर एक्सपैंड करना है, they will not borrow money. वो कोशिश करेगी कि उसकी एक्सपेंशन जो है वो रिटेन्ड अर्निंग से ही हो। दूसरा, अदर assumption is कि whenever it invests money, जो उसका जो रिटर्न होगा, that is constant. जैसे you assume 20% और 15% उसी रेट पर होगा, और cost of capital will also remain constant. Other thing is it will pay dividend at a constant rate. जो भी रेट है, it will do it at a constant rate. मॉडल ये कहता है कि the dividend decision of the firm will be different for growth firms, normal firms and declining firms. मैंने, he is trying to sort of predict how will a company decide whether it wants to give dividend or it wants to give a higher dividend, lower dividend, क्या इन्फ्लुएंस करता है किसी कंपनी। इस थियरी की खासियत ये है कि ये कम अपने जो कंपनीज हैं उसको ये डिवाइड करता है इनटू थ्री टाइप्स। एक, जिनको ग्रो करना है, दे हैव टू कीप एक्सपैंडिंग, जैसे वी सॉ अपोलो उस एग्जांपल में, टाटा मोटर्स। दूसरा, नॉर्मल फर्म्स, इनको कोई बहुत ज्यादा रिक्वायरमेंट नहीं है ग्रोथ का, ब्रिटानिया इन आवर एग्जांपल। एंड डिक्लाइनिंग फर्म्स, वो वैसे वाले तो कोई थे नहीं हमारे एग्जांपल में, बट डिक्लाइनिंग फर्म्स का मतलब है कि इनकी मार्केट अब हिल गई है, ये फर्म्स जो हैं दे आर नॉट डूइंग एज वेल एज दे कुड। ग्रोथ फर्म्स में क्या होगा, द इंटरनल रेट ऑफ रिटर्न, रिमेंबर आईआरआर, is more than the cost of capital. Internal rate of return is more than the cost of capital. Capital की जो भी cost है उससे ज्यादा मेरा रिटर्न है। That means अगर हम कुछ भी इन्वेस्ट करेंगे अपने कंपनी में, I will get a higher return than my cost. So I will make profits. Simple. Growth firms expand rapidly because of many investment opportunities yield higher returns than the cost of capital. कॉस्ट ऑफ कैपिटल से मुझे हायर रिटर्न मिल रहा है बिकॉज हम एक ऐसे एरिया में ऑपरेट कर रहे हैं जहां पर ग्रोथ बहुत है। थिंक ऑफ इलेक्ट्रिक कार्स टुडे, कंपनी विच इज इन द इलेक्ट्रिक कार सेगमेंट, दैट होल मार्केट इज ग्रोइंग। तो अगर वहां पर उसकी इन्वेस्टमेंट्स होगी तो व्हाट विल हैपन, इट इज एबल टू चार्ज अ हाई प्राइस फॉर द इलेक्ट्रिक कार, it will get good a return which is higher than the cost. Therefore, since its return is higher than its cost, that is the market condition. Therefore, these firms should reinvest their earnings in the company. Logic इस तरह से है, मेरी कंपनी एक ऐसे बिजनेस में है जहां मार्केट ग्रो कर रहा है, पैसे बनाने के अवसर है। In this situation, it is better for me to keep reinvesting the money that I make in my company so that I am able to get the most out of the opportunity that is there. If they retain all earnings, they will maximize the value of shares and the value of the firm. मतलब according to this model, which is not looking at human compulsions, कि जैसे जो प्रोमोटर्स हैं वो जिद कर रहे हैं कि मुझे भाई डिविडेंड चाहिए, वो सब नहीं। This is a model being made by an economist who is looking only at what is good for the firm. तो he's saying what, कि भाई आप एक ऐसे बिजनेस में है जहां पर आपके सामने आज के दिन में पैसे बनाने के बहुत अवसर है, तो आप भरपूर फायदा उठाएं इस चीज का। आप पैसे अभी रिटेन मत कीजिए, वो मौका मिलेगा आपको बाद में। आज के दिन में आप पैसे लीजिए, उस पैसे को लगा दीजिए अपने कंपनी में, मेक द मोस्ट, मेक ह्यूज प्रॉफिट्स। इन फ्यूचर ऑटोमेटिकली योर द वैल्यू ऑफ योर कंपनी विल बी वेरी हाई। उस समय देखी जाएगी कि क्या डिविडेंड लेना है। उसके बाद यू टेक द अदर कैटेगरी, नॉर्मल फर्म। नॉर्मल फर्म का डेफिनेशन यहां पर क्या है कि अगर मेरा जो इंटरनल रेट ऑफ रिटर्न है दैट इज द सेम एज माई कॉस्ट ऑफ कैपिटल। अगर हम जैसे कॉस्ट ऑफ कैपिटल अगर 10% है तो मेरा आईआरआर भी 10% है। दैट मीन्स कोई बहुत ज्यादा फायदा हमें नहीं हो रहा, नुकसान नहीं हो रहा है, बट आई एम नॉट मेकिंग अ ह्यूज प्रॉफिट ऑल्सो। Why? Because I do not have unlimited opportunity for expansion. मेरी मार्केट कुछ ऐसी है कि हम बहुत ज्यादा एक्सपैंड नहीं कर सकते। I am in that type of business. Now, if the firm retains the funds and invests, it will not be able to increase wealth as the return will be just equal to the cost of capital. इसका कहना है कि अगर वो रिटेन कर लेता है, लो डिविडेंड देता है या नहीं देता है, and it keeps that money with itself, तो उस पैसे का वो सदुपयोग नहीं कर पाएगा। They will not be able to make that money work for them, because the opportunities that this normal firm has are less. If they do not invest, they will in any case not earn. So for such firms, the dividend decision is neutral. इसके केस में इस बेस्ट ये है कि बहुत ज्यादा पैसे अपने पास मत रखो. कीप गिविंग इट, जितना रिक्वायरमेंट है कीप दैट अमाउंट. Rest you distribute to the shareholders as your. Deepti, are you following this? Okay. Then we come to the declining firms. जो तीसरा, हाँ, are you getting this, Deepti?
Yes, sir. Yes.
हाँ. अरे बीच बीच में कुछ बोलते रहो भाई, otherwise I sometimes I get the feeling that I'm talking only to my laptop.
Sir, here the concept is also clear कि wealth maximization is benefit. We can apply this on
Yes,
that.
yes, exactly. Absolutely. That is the point. Wealth maximization opportunity सबसे ज्यादा कहां पर है? In the growth firm. जहां पे अपॉर्चुनिटीज हमारे पास में बहुत हैं, तो वहां पर इट मेक सेंस कि हम और पैसे लगाते जाएं अपने कंपनी. बिकॉज द मोर आई पुट मनी आई पुट इनटू इट, द हायर द रिटर्न आई विल गेट, द मोर प्रॉफिट्स आई विल मेक. सब दिन दैट अपॉर्चुनिटी विल नॉट बी देयर ना. दैट अपॉर्चुनिटी इज देयर इन दिस टाइम पीरियड. Therefore, अभी के टाइम में, in this point of time, I should make the most of that opportunity and try to earn money. अगर ये हम कर लेते हैं, this is going to be something good for me in the future. हो सकता है कल होके that opportunity vanishes, I become a normal firm. जब वैसा होगा, then I'll distribute more dividend, put less into my company. Britannia is a good example, na? See, Britannia is not thinking of expanding because it feels that I have reached that point where I am comfortable in India. In other countries, maybe there are opportunities to expand. Here, I can afford to stay at this level. So this is the advantage of a multinational company which is basically operating in many countries. तो ये फायदे उसमें होते ही हैं. Now, declining firms do not have profitable opportunities to invest earnings. इनके पास नहीं है, decline कर रही. Their return on investment is less than the minimum rate required by investors. मतलब कि अगर investors expect कर रहे हैं कि भाई this company is going to give me at least 20%, तो इस कंपनी के औकात की बाहर है कि वो 20% दे दे. Therefore, for such a firm, investors of such firms would like to have the earnings distributed to them so that they can spend it or invest somewhere else. अगर उनको आप दे देंगे whatever profits you are making, if you, आपके पास opportunities है नहीं, तो आपको पैसे चाहिए किस लिए? You don't require the money, so whatever money you have, distribute it. Distribute the money. Investors के हाथ में उनके dividend मिल जाएंगे. Let them decide what they want to do with the money. If they feel that they can invest it somewhere else, in something which earns them more money, it is their decision. For you, there is no point in trying to put more money into your particular venture. Now, इसमें this is a model ना, तो model जब बनते हैं तो उसमें there are assumptions. So because of that assumptions, model has certain limitations. Deepti, for you na, since you might be pursuing this in the long run, this area, this is something which you might like to note, that in any model, if you go in for more studies in go to MBA or you go for any more studies in finance, you will notice that in all models certain assumptions are made. In this model also, like right in the beginning, we made certain assumptions. Now, because of the assumptions, there are certain limitations in the model. मतलब ये assumptions अगर गलत हो, then in that case हमारा मॉडल का भी एक तरह से तो डाउटफुल हो जाता है. So it assumes that there are no opportunities for external financing through debt or equity. देखिए इसमें क्या है कि जो भी फाइनेंसिंग होना था, it will only be done through the internal accrual. That means जो हम प्रॉफिट्स कमाएंगे वो मेरा अकेला सोर्स है फाइनेंसिंग का। हमारे पास बोरोइंग का स्कोप नहीं है। इस मॉडल में ये एक अजम्पशन है, लेकिन ये बात हमेशा सही नहीं है। इट इज नॉट ऑलवेज ट्रू ना। If such a situation exists, indicates that the business model of the company is at fault as the public will not invest in it. देखिए, अगर ये सही है कि इसको कोई लोन देने के लिए तैयार नहीं है या कोई इसमें इन्वेस्ट करने के लिए तैयार नहीं है, then this company is in trouble in any case. इसलिए ये assumptions थोड़े डाउटफुल हो जाते हैं। If the company is capable of generating normal returns, there will always be ways in which it can raise funds. ये याद आपको रखना है, ये कमी है इस मॉडल में। मॉडल assumes कि there is no way of getting money other than from profits. मतलब अगर एक्सपेंशन के लिए हमें पैसे चाहिए तो हमारे पास में एक ही रास्ता है, वो है अपने प्रॉफिट से हम पैसे रिटेन करें और उससे हम एक्सपैंड करें। बट इफ अ कंपनी इज डूइंग वेल, there will always be opportunities to raise funds through both equity, that means FPO, और through borrowing. Borrowings भी दो तरह से हो सकते हैं, या तो आप बॉन्ड्स के थ्रू बोरो करें, या नहीं तो आप बैंक से बोरो करें, या कोई इंस्टीट्यूशनल फाइनेंस जो ये हैं कंपनीज है उनसे आप बोरो करें। कंपनी अगर आपकी अच्छी कर रही है, उसका फाइनेंशियल स्ट्रेंथ अच्छा है, देयर विल ऑलवेज बी क्रेडिटर्स विलिंग टू गिव यू मनी। इसलिए इस मॉडल में ये एक कमी है। अदरवाइज जो मॉडल का जो बेसिक प्रिजम्पशन है कि अगर जो डिविडेंड डिसीजन होती है कंपनी की, डिपेंड्स ऑन which stage the company is in. Is it at the growth stage? Is it at that stability stage, normal, or is it in a declining stage? Depending on that, the dividend decision is made. दूसरा जो हम एस्पेक्ट एक इसमें देखते हैं dividends, this relates to the informational content of dividends. Remember, dividend जो हमारी स्टॉक मार्केट है, जो हमारे एनालिस्ट जो हैं, जी बिजनेस, CNBC टीवी, ये सब जो है, इसमें जो एनालिस्ट बैठे रहते हैं, और इसके अलावा जितने बड़े ब्रोकरेज हाउसेस हैं, सब में एनालिस्ट, ये लोग कंपनीज को बहुत क्लोजली स्टडी करते हैं। एंड व्हेन दे स्टडी दीज कंपनीज, दे लुक फॉर सिग्नल्स। कंपनी की जो डिसीजंस है उससे क्या पता लगता है, व्हाट इंफॉर्मेशन कैन आई गेट फ्रॉम द decision which a company has made. So agar if a company has made a dividend decision, let's say to give 50% dividend, इसका क्या मतलब है? They will try to, वो अटकल लगाएंगे कि भाई इसका मतलब ये है या इसका मतलब वो है, whatever it is. So the dividend जो है, it has a certain informational value. A company can make statements about its expected earnings growth to inform shareholders in order to create a good impression on them. मतलब जो डिविडेंड आप देते हैं, तो the company is making a statement about its expected earnings growth. Let's say कि हमने बहुत लो पे आउट रखा. What am I trying to tell my shareholder? मैं ये कह रहा हूं कि भाई तुम्हें मैं आज पैसे नहीं दे रहा हूं, मैं डिविडेंड नहीं दे रहा हूं. Why? Because I feel that I can earn much more money for you, by you are a partner in my company, by you are part owner. तो आपके लिए हम कहीं ज्यादा पैसा कमा सकते हैं by taking that money and investing it in the company itself. आपको हम पैसे देते तो आप क्या करते? You also would have used that money to invest somewhere. I will earn more money for you by taking that money and investing it in my company. This is the information. These statements of future growth will have more value if they are followed by actual payment of dividend. Let's say कि ऐसा इसने किया, कंपनी जो है मेड अ लो पे आउट, इसने ये सिग्नल किया अपने शेयर होल्डर्स को कि भाई आई एम गोइंग टू डू वेल इन द फ्यूचर। इसके बाद एक्चुअली इट डज वेल, और अगले साल या उसके बाद अगले साल ये एक हाई डिविडेंड दे देता है, देन व्हाट विल हैपन? लोगों की आस्था बनी रहेगी कंपनी। दे विल से कि हाँ, वी कैन रिलाई ऑन द इंफॉर्मेशन कंटेंट दैट वी आर गेटिंग फ्रॉम देयर डिविडेंड्स। अगर वो कम दे रही है तो इसका मतलब है कि आने वाले दिनों में ये काफी तगड़ी डिविडेंड देने वाली है। दैट इज द मैसेज द पब्लिक इज गेटिंग। दूसरा इसमें एक और चीज क्या है कि डिविडेंड्स अगर कोई कंपनी देती है तो एक धारणा लोगों के मन में है कि दिस मीन्स दैट द कंपनी इज फाइनेंशियली स्ट्रांग एंड प्रॉफिटेबल. दिस मे नॉट बी करेक्ट, दिस मे नॉट बी करेक्ट, लेकिन एक एक आप आम धारणा है कि अगर कोई कंपनी डिविडेंड दे रही है तो इसमें दम है. But remember, when we were discussing this earlier, we were saying that two things we say. Number one, the profits, if they are retained, they may lead the company, they give the company as a very low cost way of expanding its own operations. फ्यूचर में ये कंपनी और बहुत अच्छी कर सकती है अगर वो अपने प्रॉफिट्स को अपने ही कंपनी में इन्वेस्ट करे. इसलिए अगर कोई कंपनी लो डिविडेंड देती है तो इट इज नॉट फाइनेंशियली स्ट्रांग, ये फीलिंग गलत है. लेकिन योर एवरेज इन्वेस्टर विल नॉट लुक लाइक दैट. ह्यूमन साइकोलॉजी क्या है इसमें? द साइकोलॉजी ऑफ द इन्वेस्टर इज कि अगर मैं पैसे कहीं लगाता हूं और वो रिटर्न डिविडेंड जो है वो रिटर्न उसको समझिए वो अच्छी दे देता है कंपनी, देन व्हाट डज दैट मीन? दिस कंपनी इज फाइनेंशियली स्ट्रांग. In basic point is dividend generally means you are sending a positive signal. तो बहुत पारखी होंगे वो समझ पाएंगे कि लो पे आउट में भी फायदा हो सकता है. A change in dividend policy is associated with a change in profitability. आप 50% पिछले 4-5 साल से दे रहे थे, इस साल आपने 40% कर दिया. तो some may feel कि यू आर फीलिंग दैट फ्यूचर में प्रॉफिटेबिलिटी प्रॉफिट्स लेट्स से अर्न करने की अपॉर्चुनिटीज जो हैं वो कम है, एंड दिस इज व्हाई यू हैव रिड्यूस द डिविडेंड. इंक्रीज इन डिविडेंड कैन देयरफॉर हैव अ गुड इफेक्ट ऑन शेयर प्राइसेस एंड वाइस वर्सा. मतलब कि अगर आप इंक्रीज कर देते हैं डिविडेंड को, इट इज वेरी पॉसिबल that people will get a positive signal that this company is actually doing very well. This is why it has increased its dividend. And therefore, we should buy shares of this company. So buy shares of this company के चलते क्या होगा? Demand of the shares will go up. If the demand goes up, the price will also go up. So this information thing, that means that the message which the dividend gives is generally positive. This is the point being made here. So dividend signaling. Suppose the company is following a policy of paying a dividend of rupees 2 per share against earnings of rupees 4 per share. माने 50% वो दे देती है. Company's earning goes up to rupees 7 per share, but it continues to pay rupees 2 per share. The assumption made by the public is that the increase in profit was a one-time increase and the demand for the shares may not increase. आप इस साइकोलॉजी को देखिए. आप हर साल आपका 50% आप दिया करते थे. आप 2 रुपए देते थे, आप 4 कमाते थे, आप 2 देते थे. किसी एक साल में यू हैव सडनली योर अर्निंग्स हैज गॉन अप टू 7, लेकिन आप अभी भी 2 रुपए दे रहे हैं. सी दिस कैन बी इंटरप्रेटेड इन 2 ways. एक इंटरप्रिटेशन ये हो सकता था कि 2 रुपये मैं दे रहा हूं, 5 रुपये मैं लगा रहा हूं कंपनी. Why? Because I feel that there is an opportunity for me. If I put this 5 rupees into my company, आने वाले दिनों में मैं 10 कमाऊं. लेकिन the average investor may assume कि भाई आप 4 पर 2 देते थे, 7 पर भी आप 2 दे रहे हैं, इसका माने आपका फ्यूचर अच्छा नहीं. उलट जाता है कई बार ना. पीपल लुक एट समथिंग ओनली फ्रॉम देयर ओन पर्सपेक्टिव. So everybody is not going to be a financial analyst and begin to look at each and everything. Average investor may take this view कि प्रॉफिट जो है, जो 7 हुआ था आपका, वो बेसिकली वन टाइम हुआ था. आने वाले दिनों में फिर आप औकात पर आ जाएंगे, फिर वही 4 का प्रॉफिट ही आपको होना है. The company decides to pay rupees 4 per share as dividend against earning of rupees 7 per share. अगर ऐसा करता है The assumption is that the management is expecting a long-term increase in earnings and demand would increase. That means कि अगर आप वही, it's the same thing. If you are increasing the dividend or the percentage, the payout ratio अगर आप बढ़ा रहे हैं, then in that case the signal is positive. If the payout ratio is low, the signal tends to be negative. But please remember, this may not be true. This is the point I've been trying to make throughout. This may not be true at all. So it is the practice of the company to pay 50% dividends, which they have increased only when earnings have increased to new levels. Then an increase in the dividend will convey the signal that the company is going to perform better in the days ahead, and this will increase its share price. माने कोई कंपनी है जो कि 50% ही देती थी, अगर वो बढ़ा देती है 50% से, तो इससे इमीडिएट अजम्पशन ये है कि इसके पास में अपॉर्चुनिटीज ज्यादा हैं, आने वाले दिनों में ये और अच्छी करने वाली है, दैट्स व्हाई ये हमें ज्यादा दे रही है, एंड दैट विल हैव द रिजल्ट ऑफ इंक्रीजिंग द डिमांड फॉर इट शेयर्स and increasing the share price. If the policy is to give a higher dividend with every cyclical change in earnings, then an increase in the dividend will not lead to the market being influenced favorably. कुछ कुछ कंपनीज का जो ये होता है, जो अर्निंग्स होता है, इट इज साइक्लिकल. बैंकिंग आप ले लीजिए फॉर एग्जांपल. बैंकिंग कंपनीज, उसका एक साइकिल है, इकोनॉमिक साइकिल से वो जुड़ा हुआ है. जब इकोनॉमी इज परफॉर्मिंग वेरी वेल, lots of companies are investing in the economy, there is more opportunities for a banker to lend. तो अगर वो lend करता है, it earns more. If it earns more, its profits are more. Profit अगर उसका ज्यादा है, then the company will, the banker may decide कि चलो हम लोगों को dividends अपना ज्यादा दे दें. साइकिल है इकोनॉमी का. इकोनॉमी goes into a low growth cycle. लो ग्रोथ साइकिल में क्या होगा कि जो प्राइवेट सेक्टर कंपनीज हैं मोस्टली, दे विल टेंड टू इन्वेस्ट लेस. वो इन्वेस्ट नहीं करेंगे, वो बोरो भी कम करेंगे. अगर वो कम बोरो करेंगे, व्हाट विल हैपन? द बैंकर हैज लेस अपॉर्चुनिटी टू गिव लोन्स. दैट मीन्स ही विल मेक लेस प्रॉफिट्स. तो अगर इफ इट इज मेकिंग लेस प्रॉफिट्स, इट विल रिड्यूस इट्स डिविडेंड. तो बेसिकली इट्स अ साइक्लिकल, ये जो हमारी कंपनी है बैंकिंग कंपनी, इट इज इन अ साइक्लिकल इंडस्ट्री. एक साइक्लिकल इंडस्ट्री में क्या होता है कि अगर यहां पर आप, व्हेन द साइकिल इज इन योर फेवर, मतलब इट इज अ राइजिंग साइकिल, हाई माने हाई ग्रोथ साइकिल, उस समय अगर आप एक हायर डिविडेंड देंगे, तो मार्केट इस चीज को समझ जाएगी कि भाई ये साइक्लिकल है, अभी अच्छे दिन आए हुए हैं, इसलिए ये इसका प्रॉफिट ज्यादा है, देयरफॉर इट इज गिविंग अस हायर डिविडेंड्स. आने वाले दिनों में दिस मे नॉट बी देयर. फॉर साइक्लिकल इंडस्ट्रीज दिस विल बी द वे दे विल इंटरप्रेट द सिग्नल. देन वी कम टू द लास्ट पार्ट ऑफ दिस डिविडेंड वाला, कि डिविडेंड डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन पॉलिसीज. बिफोर आई स्टार्ट विद दिस, लेट मी जस्ट हैव अ ग्लास ऑफ वाटर. Okay, I'm back. Deepti, Vivek, hope you are there.
Yes, sir. Yeah, sir.
So there are three types of dividend
Yes,
policy.
sir.
Yes, Deepti. Three types of dividend policies. एक है stable dividend policy. One is a constant dividend policy. और एक है एक residual dividend policy. Stable में क्या है? Stable dividend policy सबसे आसान, एक प्रिडिक्टेबल अमाउंट ऑफ डिविडेंड हर साल अपने हम शेयर होल्डर्स को दे देते हैं, और लार्ज नंबर ऑफ इन्वेस्टर्स दे आर हैप्पी विद दिस कि व्हेन अर्निंग्स अगर कम है या ज्यादा हो, हम एक सर्टेन रेट पर आपको दे देते हैं. सो आई एम नॉट एक्चुअली लिंकिंग इट with my earnings. Your dividend is stable. Earnings may be going up and down. आप हम एक certain rate दे देंगे. The goal is to align the dividend policy with the long-term growth of the company rather than with quarterly earnings volatility. तो basically यहाँ पे assumption ये है, in the long run we will do well. आज के दिन में if we have not done so well, कोई बात नहीं है. Let us not penalize our shareholders. We will give them a good return even now. आने वाले दिनों में we are going to do well. So let us have a stable policy here. थोड़ा ऊपर नीचे होगा, but broadly it will be okay. The danger of the policy is that if it is changed, it will affect the attitude of investors towards the company. If a company with a pattern of stable dividend misses a payment, the impact will be much greater than a company that has an unstable policy. मतलब कि कुछ कंपनीज ऐसे हैं, उस एग्जांपल में भी आप देख रहे होंगे कि देयर आर मेनी कंपनीज व्हिच समटाइम्स डू नॉट गिव एनी डिविडेंड एट ऑल. वी सॉ टाटा मोटर्स, वी सॉ अपोलो. उस ईयर में, इन दैट ईयर दे डिड नॉट गिव डिविडेंड्स. तो ये स्टेबल पॉलिसी वाले ये लोग नहीं है. इनका भी बहुत क्लियर रहा होगा कि देयर इज अ बेटर चांस फॉर अस, और द बेटर more prudent decision from our point of view is to invest the profits or in the company itself. तो कंपनी को आगे रखते हुए ये डिविडेंड नहीं दिए. Now this sort of stable dividend में क्या होगा कि you will not do this. You will say कि ठीक है, थोड़ा ऊपर नीचे हम जो भी करें, लेकिन डिविडेंड हम देंगे हर साल. Logic there is कि let my investors be happy. They invested in my company. It is my duty to give them dividends, so I will give dividends. Okay, so this is one thing.
There is a question. Some of the companies offer dividend quarterly on their quarter basis result.
That, मेरे ख्याल में, that is a short term thing.
Not but from continuously means they are giving the benefits to the shareholder.
That means ना कि they are very sure about their long term growth. उसका विवेक बस हाँ. So they are very very sure about their long term growth कि yes we will continue to do well. Therefore दूसरा इसमें और एक चीज है कि remember dividend सबसे ज्यादा benefit promoter को देता है. If you are giving quarterly dividends, in a manner of speaking, you are paying a huge amount to your promoter. As a retail shareholder, आपको क्या मिल रहा है उसमें? You are not going to get a huge amount. You may get it every 3 months, but what? Small amount. But think of Mr. Agarwal, वो जो बैठे हुए हैं ऊपर में, that gentleman is getting a huge amount. So if every quarter that amount is coming to him, I would say that a quarterly dividend policy, the biggest gainer is the promoter shareholder.
Right.
देखिए ये सब जो चीजें हैं ना, these are things which are decided to a large extent by the promoters themselves, because they have the largest say in the management of the company. Now, the other is the constant dividend policy. तो इसमें क्या है कि whether it is a boom year, मतलब बहुत अच्छा जा रहा है आपका earnings, or whether it is a year when the earnings are not so good, you will maintain a constant dividend. तो you will pay a percentage of your earnings. जैसे आप पहले से फिक्स कर लिए कि भाई हर साल हम 30% देंगे. अब even if I get extraordinary profits, even then I will pay only 30%. If I make low profits, even then I will pay only 30%. तो इसमें क्या होता है कि अगर प्रॉफिट्स बहुत हाई है तो इन्वेस्टर्स विल गेट अ लॉट, उनको बहुत मिल जाएगा, बिकॉज ये तो फिक्स्ड है 30. अगर प्रॉफिट्स लो है तो इन्वेस्टर्स विल गेट 30%, लेकिन एक्चुअल अमाउंट विल बी मच लेस. So if earnings are up, investors get a larger dividend. Earnings are down, they may not receive a great dividend. The primary drawback to the method is the volatility of earnings and dividends. Stable वाले में क्या था कि I would make sure कि minimum इतने रुपए आपको मिल जाए. अपना हम परसेंटेज ऊपर नीचे जो करना होता कर देते, लेकिन आपको अगर जैसे इतने पैसे हर बार हम देंगे, I will make sure you will get that per shareholder. Residual dividend policy is also highly volatile, लेकिन this is a safe policy. Residual का क्या मतलब होता है? Anyone? Deepti, Vivek, what do you think residual means? नहीं? Nobody wants to try?
Sir, the policy which is for a longer period of a time.
नहीं. What does the word residual mean, Deepti? See, residual means जो बचा हुआ है, whatever is left. So the residual dividend policy is basically saying कि after I have provided for everything, हमारा अपना जो रिक्वायरमेंट्स था कैपिटल एक्सपेंडिचर का, हमारा जो रिक्वायरमेंट था वर्किंग कैपिटल का, जो कुछ भी हमारी जरूरतें थी, पहले उस पैसे को हम प्रॉफिट से निकाल लेंगे. आफ्टर डूइंग ऑल दिस, whatever is left, that I will pay as dividend. So basically, here I am putting my company first. I am not looking at the investor as the priority. मेरा है कि let's say कि I am anticipating कि there is a huge investment I have to make in upgrading the assets of the company. I will take my profits and I will divert it to the purchase of these assets. उसके बाद जो पैसे बचेंगे, अगर बचते हैं तो हम देंगे, अगर नहीं बचते हैं I will not give. तो कुछ लोगों के नजर में this is the only acceptable dividend policy, because इसमें क्या होता है कि कंपनी का हित हमेशा सबसे प्रथम है. The company gets the best deal here. Investors not so much. Investors के लिए शायद उतना अच्छा ना हो. Company is definitely going to get the best deal in a residual dividend policy. Okay. So this now was about dividends. ये वाला प्लस जो बोनस और स्प्लिट का हमने पिछली बार जो किया, ये इन दोनों चीजों को अगर आप कंबाइन कर लेते हैं, it will give you a very good idea about this whole dividend thing. We discussed one model also. We looked at different types of dividend policy. We looked at the basic reasons for dividends. You have a fairly good idea about what dividend distribution is all about. And any questions, Deepti or Vivek?
The question is that how to identify the company's means working good, means it's all the assumptions.
How to identify whether a company is doing well? That is something which we will look at when we do it. It is part of my financial accounting thing. So we will look at it in a financial way. From the figures which the company gives us, we can make a we have a general understanding of whether the company is doing well or not. We also have to look at non-financial areas. Remember, dividend जो है ना, this is only important from one point of view. Am I using my profits for the benefit of my company, or am I just taking my profit and giving it to my shareholders? When you do it for the benefit of your company and your company is in a growth market, the chances are that you will make a huge profit, and your company will do well. In the long run, your shareholders will do well. If on the other hand, you retain your profits, आप नहीं देते हैं डिविडेंड, और आप एक ऐसे मार्केट में हैं जिसका पर इट इज नॉट गोइंग टू डू वेल, वो मार्केट इज उसके अच्छे दिन अब खत्म हो गए. You take a market like cigarettes, tobacco. इतना हाई टैक्सेशन हो गया है कि जो फ्रॉम अ सिगरेट कंपनीज पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू, अच्छे दिन तो अब रेयर व्यू मिरर में है ना, वो तो पीछे हो गए.
ITC is remaining.
हाँ,
ITC is still remaining.
नहीं, बिकॉज इट हैज अदर
Other
it
area.
has many other businesses. When I was your age, or even when I was in school, एक मल्टीनेशनल ब्रांड होता था सिगरेट्स का. इट वाज कॉल्ड डनहिल. मतलब जो सबसे फैंसी सिगरेट हुआ करता था. और इन माय ओपिनियन, जो आई एम नॉट अ स्मोकर, इसलिए आई डोंट नो हाउ इट टेस्टेड, बट आई कैन से वन थिंग, उसके पैकेट्स बहुत खूबसूरत होते थे. डनहिल. नाउ gradually what happened, as this view became strong that smoking leads to cancer, and in many countries it became mandatory to put the photos of the lungs, damaged lungs or damaged body organs, on the packet of the cigarette itself, to discourage people from actually buying those cigarettes. Cigarette sales went down. As cigarette sales went down, it became very clear that this is not a growth industry anymore. This is now a declining industry.
Here, one
Now,
question rise.
हाँ,
Sorry, I have to interrupt. Surrogates ads of tobacco, chewable tobacco.
हाँ,
So why still is the company are promoting by the others? Means they are daily surrogate ads, means elaichi, flavor elaichi, but instead of Vimal is like that flavor elaichi, it's a surrogate ad.
surrogate ads आपको ज्यादा मिलेगा in what? In alcohol. Surrogate ads you will find mostly in the case of drinks, जहां पर शिवास रीगल का distilled water आपको मिलेगा. That sort of thing. Now you are asking a question, why do they use surrogate ads? See,
Yeah.
they are using surrogate ads to remind people of their brand, so that existing customers, नए कस्टमर तो नहीं मिलेंगे surrogate ads से, लेकिन जो existing customers आपके हैं, जो आपके ब्रांड के नाम को पहचानते हैं, दे आर रिमाइंडेड कि हाँ भाई, शिवास रीगल एक अच्छी विस्की है. डिस्टिल वाटर से आई एम नॉट गेटिंग डिस्ट्रैक्टेड इन एनी केस. दिस इज व्हाट आई वांट. ठीक है, चलो, आई विल बाय इट. बट द whiskies में this does not apply so much, but in the case of cigarettes के केस में it is very very clear that आने वाले दिनों में इसकी बिजनेस, मार्केट इज नॉट गोइंग टू ग्रो. अगर मार्केट का, लेट्स से कि पूरे मार्केट का जो ये है इज 1 बिलियन, 1 बिलियन रुपया है उसका. व्हाट, एक कंपनी का शेयर ऊपर हो सकता है, किसी और कंपनी का शेयर ऊपर हो सकता है, किसी का नीचे होगा, किसी को ऊपर होगा, बट द मार्केट साइज इज नॉट गोइंग टू इंक्रीज. विद इन दैट आप जो आपको मिल जाए वो मिल जाए. ऐसे केस में, जैसे आई वाज टॉकिंग अबाउट डनहिल, व्हाट डिड डनहिल डू? डनहिल सिगरेट बनाना बंद नहीं किया. डनहिल स्टिल मेक सिगरेट्स, वो सब है, बट इट डाइवर्टेड. पैसे तो बहुत थे उसके पास भाई, जब अच्छे दिन थे, दे मेड अ ह्यूज अमाउंट ऑफ मनी. what did it do? It diverted the money to luxury goods. तो अब वो क्या करता है कि it makes a different brand of high priced goods. वो उसमें पैसा चला गया. And they are using that to continue the company. मतलब जो उसकी मिशन थी to make cigarettes, उससे ये अब हट गया. Now what it is doing some business model अपना change कर लिया, and it is going into fields where they feel there is more scope for growth.
Diversification.
हाँ, इट्स अ डाइवर्सिफिकेशन. ये उस तरह का है जहां के आपका प्राइमरी एक्टिविटी इज नाउ अ स्मॉलर पार्ट ऑफ योर बिजनेस. जो नई एक्टिविटीज जिसमें आपको फ्यूचर दिख रही हैं, यू आर टेकिंग दैट एक्टिविटी नाउ एज द मेन पार्ट ऑफ योर बिजनेस. तो इफ यू आर इन दैट सॉर्ट ऑफ इंडस्ट्री, देन गिविंग डिविडेंड्स, इट मेक्स सम सेंस ना, कि भाई हमारे इंडस्ट्री में तो बहुत ज्यादा ग्रोथ है नहीं, इसमें हम पैसे लगा नहीं सकते हैं, इसलिए बेटर है कि जो भी प्रॉफिट्स कमाई हो रही है हम अपने शेयर होल्डर्स को दे देते हैं कि भाई आपके चलते ये कंपनी है, इससे ज्यादा प्रॉफिट्स होगी नहीं, ठीक है अपना हिस्सा ले लो, नेक्स्ट ईयर अगेन विल मेक सम प्रॉफिट्स, विल सी. नाउ व्हेन यू डिसाइड टू डाइवर्सिफाई, then a new opportunity will open up. Once a new opportunity opens up, then you are in a position to take the money and invest it. तब maybe then at that point of time you can go for a low payout policy. जो पैसे आपके हैं वो आप जो आपका नया जो बिजनेस आपने सोच रखा है उसमें आप इन्वेस्ट कीजिए और पैसे बनाइए. So it's like that. Now we'll come to another important part, cost of capital. Now remember, when we say cost of capital here, we are not talking only about equity capital. यहाँ पे cost of capital का मतलब है we treat equity as capital, we treat loans as capital. So मतलब funds, both two sources है ना. In our balance sheet, if you look at the liability side, ये आपका capital है. कंपनी के पास जो पैसे हैं for its long term business, it is coming from these two sources. Okay? Just a reminder. Okay. Now, capital structure just that slide on the balance sheet was just to remind you, for those of you who are not commerce students, this is where the left hand side of the balance sheet, sources of funds में क्या क्या आपके हैं, long term borrowings and equity capital. When we looked at those 6 big Indian companies, when we are looking at dividend distribution, there also we noticed we had taken these two figures, the shareholders, the total shareholder value and the equity, so that you know what equity and debt are. So this is the main source of funds for the company. Equity and debt are the only two ways of obtaining capital for the company. The board has to decide कि आप कितने इक्विटी रखेंगे, कितने डेट रखेंगे. अगर आप उस कंपनी में उस स्लाइड में वापस अब जाके देखें, तो यू विल सी दैट दोज कंपनीज विच रिक्वायर मोर कैपिटल लाइक टाटा मोटर्स, उनका बोरोइंग्स ज्यादा है. एंड दोज कंपनीज विच रिक्वायर वेरी लिटिल कैपिटल, उनका जो है जैसे ब्रिटानिया, उनका बहुत नॉमिनल ये है, डेट है. Now, both equity and debt have a cost. Equity capital is not free. Please remember this. Dividend को आप cost से अगर ये relate करते हैं अपने मन में कि what is the cost of my capital, it is dividend, because just like when I take a loan from a bank, what is the cost? The interest rate. In the case of the इक्विटी, व्हाट इज द कॉस्ट? इट इज द डिविडेंड. अगर आप ये सोच रहे हैं कि डिविडेंड हम नहीं भी दे सकते हैं, आई मे नॉट ऑल्सो गिव, देयरफॉर इक्विटी फ्री है, तो आप फिर गलत सोच रहे हैं. इट्स नॉट लाइक दैट. द ओनली टाइम व्हेन यू डू नॉट पे डिविडेंड्स, what happens is there is an immediate expectation कि फ्यूचर में आप ज्यादा डिविडेंड्स देंगे। ठीक है। लोन का तो बहुत क्लियर है, आप 1 करोड़ लोन में लेते हैं, इफ द बैंकर वांट्स 12% इंटरेस्ट, आपका कॉस्ट ऑफ डेट इज 12%। In the case, suppose you raise 200 crores as equity shares, what is the return the shareholder expects? इसमें तो 12% क्लियर था। यहां पर तो उस तरह का कोई माने एक रेट उसके साथ फिक्स तो है नहीं। when you buy shares in a company, they are not making a promise कि I will give you 20% dividend, 30% dividend. That is not there. But does that mean that you do not have an expectation? You have an expectation, no? और आपका एक्सपेक्टेशन इस बैंकर से तो ज्यादा होना चाहिए,
Right.
बिकॉज यू आर टेकिंग अ हायर रिस्क। बैंकर इसमें पैसे अगर लगाया तो ही हैज सम सिक्योरिटी, उसके पास में कुछ मॉर्गेज होगा, उसके पास में और अदर लिक्विड सिक्योरिटीज होंगे, कुछ ना कुछ होगा उसके पास, जिसके स्ट्रेंथ पर वो लोन दे रहा है। लेकिन आपके पास तो कुछ भी नहीं, आप तो बस भरोसे पर दे रहे हैं पैसे, तो योर रिस्क इज हायर। So the simple principle is, if I take a higher risk, I therefore need a higher return. So the cost of equity will always be higher than the cost of debt. Remember this. इसमें advantage सिर्फ ये है कि unlike debt, there is no एक repayment schedule आपके सामने नहीं। You don't have a schedule कि भाई interest हर क्वार्टर आपको देना है, आपको रीपेमेंट पूरा अमाउंट का भी करना है। और इक्विटी में एक बहुत सबसे बड़ा फायदा ये है कि द एक्चुअल अमाउंट ऑफ द शेयर दैट यू डू नॉट हैव टू रिटर्न। जब तक आपकी कंपनी जीवित है, जब तक वो चल रही है, तब तक वो पैसे आपके पास ही रहेंगे, एंड नोबडी कैन मेक अ डिमांड ऑन यू टू रिटर्न दैट शेयर अमाउंट। सो आई वुड से दैट अ रीजनेबल रिटर्न वुड बी 20%। रिस्क मेरा ज्यादा है, 12% तो विदाउट रिस्क मिल रहा था, या कम रिस्क में मिल रहा है, तो ज्यादा रिस्क लेते हैं तो कम से कम 20% तो दो। सो वन थिंग शुड बी देयर इन योर माइंड कि इक्विटी में द एक्चुअल कॉस्ट ऑफ इक्विटी इज जनरली हायर। So if the cost of equity is 12 and is sorry, the cost of debt is 12, the cost of equity is 20, what is the cost of capital? ये एक cost of capital के लिए this is the way in which your mind must work. आप इस वे में सोचिए, हमारे पास में 100 रुपए है, 100 रुपए में 70 रुपए मेरे पास आते हैं इक्विटी से, इसका कॉस्ट है 20%। 30 रुपए मेरे पास आते हैं डेट से, इसका कॉस्ट है 12। तो अगर दोनों का हम एवरेज निकालेंगे, इट विल डिपेंड ऑन द अमाउंट ऑफ फंड्स विच इज कमिंग फ्रॉम इक्विटी एंड द अमाउंट ऑफ फंड्स विच इज कमिंग फ्रॉम डेट। नाउ लुक एट दिस, दिस इज द बैलेंस शीट ऑफ एनटीपीसी। इट इज टेकन फ्रॉम मनी कंट्रोल, very easy to get this figure.
Right.
17 to 21, these are their annual figures. Equity share capital in March 21, as you can see, is about 9,700 crores. इसका total share capital is 9,700 crores, लेकिन reserves and surplus देखिए कितना है, it is 1,09,288 crores NTPC का। Okay, total reserves and surplus इतना हो गया। Total shareholders funds, that means the equity share capital plus the reserves is this much. Okay, इसका long term borrowings क्या है? The long term borrowing is more than the shareholders funds. Why is this happening? Because NTPC Thermal Power Corporation investment बहुत ज्यादा है इसमें। It's a capital intensive industry. वो जनरेट करेगी इलेक्ट्रिसिटी, थर्मल है तो बेसिकली कोल बेस्ड यूनिट्स है, सो इट इज गोइंग टू बी अ ह्यूज इन्वेस्टमेंट, देयरफॉर इट नीड्स अ लॉट ऑफ मनी। इसका जो सोर्सिंग हो रहा है अपने पैसों का, कैपिटल स्ट्रक्चर इसका जो है वो बेसिकली है कि इनिशियल पैसा ये लगाया तो पब्लिक से दे टुक दिस मनी, देन दे अर्नड प्रॉफिट्स ओवर द इयर्स। आज वो प्रॉफिट्स रिजर्व्स इनके 1,18,00,000 हो गए, सॉरी 1,18,000 करोड़ हो गए। टोटल लॉन्ग टर्म बोरोइंग्स इज मच मोर देन दैट। टाटा मोटर्स देखिए, सेम 5 years के फिगर्स हैं। इक्विटी शेयर इज 765 crores, रिजर्व एंड सरप्लस अब तक के 18,290 करोड़, टोटल शेयर होल्डर्स फंड्स इज 19,055 crores, और टोटल बोरोइंग्स जो है वो है 16,000 करोड़। वंस अगेन, कैपिटल इंटेंसिव इंडस्ट्री, कैपिटल स्ट्रक्चर इनका इस तरह का है, जहां पर कि एनटीपीसी के केस में तो व्हाट वर वी सेइंग कि इनका डेट ज्यादा है, इक्विटी कम है। In the case of Tata Motors, you can see that debt is 16, equity is 19. इसमें the ratio अगर आप इन दोनों का निकालेंगे तो you will see that it is how much? 46% जो है वो डेट है इसमें, 54% is the equity. This was just to give you an idea about what actually happens in the case of capital intensive companies, because उनको कैपिटल की जरूरत ज्यादा है, therefore वो बोरो उनको बहुत करना पड़ता है। Now if their return is high, then they will make a lot of profit, because like we were saying, the cost of debt is low. Cost of debt जो है will be lower than cost of equity. Therefore, it is good for them to take a lot of debt. So public utility companies like NTPC with definite sources of revenue will generally have high debt and low capital. देखिए इसमें ना एक चीज आप नोट कीजिए, पब्लिक यूटिलिटी, वाई? बिकॉज इट इज सप्लाइंग अ पब्लिक यूटिलिटी, पावर। हम सबको पावर की जरूरत है। This is supplying power. Power will always sell. That means कि revenue will always come. Revenue इसका कैश फ्लो होना ही है। प्रॉफिट होता है कि नहीं, that's a different thing. But there will always be a cash flow. And if there is a regular cash flow, they will be able to service their debt. That means कि उसका जो interest installment जो भी उसको देना है, it will be possible for them. Capital intensive companies like auto companies will have high debt and low capital. These companies generally have stable revenue sources from which debt repayments can be made. वही कंपनी डेट ले सकती है जिसके पास में ऐसा प्रोडक्ट हो जो कि अश्योर्ड है कि इट विल सेल। वो बिकेगा ही प्रोडक्ट। अगर वो बिकेगा, देन इन दैट केस दे विल गेट a cash flow, and if they get a cash flow, then in that case they will be in a position, cash रहेगा पास में ना, so then they are in a position to repay their creditors. This is the logic here.
But every year NTPC we saw in the chart, every year the borrowing is increasing.
हाँ, there is a political reason behind that. उसको वो
Okay.
point को रहने दीजिए।
Okay.
Political reason इसमें क्या है कि we do not charge the rates for the power generated which is viable for that company. दिक्कत यहां पर आ जाती है विवेक। See, if the decision is made commercially ना, तो एनटीपीसी ऐसी कंपनी कभी भी लॉस में जा ही नहीं सकती है। इट विल मेक ह्यूज प्रॉफिट्स। प्रॉब्लम ये है इन आवर कंट्री कि वी आर अनएबल टू सेल पावर at the rate which makes it profitable for a company to generate power. Always इसमें बीच में पॉलिटिक्स आता है and they are forced to keep it low. जिस तरह से पेट्रोल में है, same thing.
Torrent power is also there in the other states. They are making huge profit.
हाँ,
torrent power.
Torrent power is there also. So there are, see, torrent power also will be forced to go by the government guidelines. They will make a profit probably, but there is a lot of pressure. They will never be able to sell beyond, because अगर वो ज्यादा लेते हैं ना, see what happens. The power, हमारे यहाँ जो power sector है, it is divided into three let's say segments. One is generation, जैसे एनटीपीसी है, इट इज जनरेटिंग पावर, ये ग्रिड में डाल देता है. इसका काम क्या है? पावर जनरेट करो एंड देन यू पुट इट इनटू द इलेक्ट्रिकल ग्रिड. ग्रिड के बाद सपोज फ्रॉम द ग्रिड द एक्चुअल ट्रांसमिशन, वो जो हाई टेंशन वायर्स जो होते हैं, द एक्चुअल ट्रांसमिशन ऑफ द पावर फ्रॉम द ग्रिड टू द डिफरेंट कंज्यूमर्स, वो करती है ट्रांसमिशन कंपनी. और उसके बाद वंस इट रीचेस द टाउन, लेट्स से टाउन तक वो ले आया, जो एक्चुअल एंड यूजर तक जो उसका डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन है, दैट इज डन बाय अ डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन कंपनी. तीन इसके सेगमेंट्स. नाउ जो जनरेशन कंपनी है, अगर वो अपना एक्चुअल पैसा लेने लगे आपसे विथ अ डिसेंट अमाउंट ऑफ प्रॉफिट, ट्रांसमिशन भी अपना फुल पैसा लेने लगे, और द डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर ऑल्सो टेक्स हिज फुल मनी, तो उसका रिजल्ट क्या होगा कि योर कॉस्ट पर यूनिट ऑफ इलेक्ट्रिसिटी विल बी मच हायर देन व्हाट यू आर पेइंग. और यहां पर क्या हमारा ये है, व्हाट इज द पॉलिटिकल साइड? फ्री इलेक्ट्रिसिटी फॉर फार्मर, है ना? आज के दिन में यू आर सिटिंग इन हैदराबाद, इन योर नेबरिंग आंध्र प्रदेश, a white paper has come out on the power problem in Andhra Pradesh. 6-7 पन्ने का है. अगर उसको आप पढ़ेंगे तो you will begin to see कि how difficult it is to make a profit in the electrical sector. तो जब profits नहीं होंगे तो क्या करेगा वो? It has to borrow. See, the internal accruals are not happening, so that company is forced to borrow to meet its needs. I would say that is the main reason why इतना इसको बोरोइंग का जरूरत है. वरना इसके जो प्रॉफिट्स अगर सही वे में प्राइसिंग होती, इसके ये के जो जनरेट कर रही है पावर, इट वुड हैव एंडेड अप मेकिंग मोर मनी. इसके पास में सही अमाउंट ऑफ प्रॉफिट्स होते और उसी प्रॉफिट के रिटेन अर्निंग से इसका काम चल गया होता. बट दैट इज नॉट हैपनिंग इन दिस केस. ओके, नाउ basic point I'm trying to make is whether NTPC makes a profit or it doesn't make a profit, every day consumers are paying their bills. इसके पास में पैसे का फ्लो हमेशा है, and since there is a flow of money, it is easy for them to repay debt. This is the point which is important. जो सर्विस कंपनीज होते हैं, you take TCS, इन्फोसिस, विप्रो, इनका मेन इन्वेस्टमेंट इज इन ह्यूमन रिसोर्सेज. कैपिटल इन्वेस्टमेंट बहुत कम होता है. तो इसके केस में क्या होगा कि दे डोंट नीड टू बोरो सो मच. तो इनका बैलेंस शीट देखेंगे, व्हाट आर यू गोइंग टू ऑब्जर्व? इट विल हैव हाई इक्विटी, लो डेट, कभी कभी नो डेट, वैसा भी हो सकता है. तो अगर आप इनका, वी विल लुक एट देयर बैलेंस शीट्स. लुक एट दिस, ये वाला जो है, ये हमारा, जस्ट अ मिनट, दिस इज इन्फोसिस है. तो इन्फोसिस का once again the balance sheets for the same years 17 to 21. What are we seeing here? Look at the long term borrowings here, zero. 2130 करोड़ कैपिटल. 5 साल में you notice the capital has almost doubled from 1100 to 2130 equity share capital. ये अपना पब्लिक ऑफर्स लेके आए, इनको जो भी जरूरत इनको थी ये पब्लिक से ले लिए. दे डिड नॉट नीड एनीथिंग मोर. इनका प्रॉफिट जनरेशन बहुत तगड़ा है. एवरी ईयर इट इज इंक्रीजिंग एंड it is now close to 69,000 crores. शेयर होल्डर्स फंड 71,000, इससे ज्यादा की जरूरत इनको नहीं है। तो इनका कैपिटल स्ट्रक्चर में क्या है? 100% इक्विटी। दे डोंट नीड एनी फर्दर मनी। और आप देखें 5 साल में कभी ऐसा कोई मौका था ही नहीं जब इनको कोई लोन वगैरह या बोरोविंग्स की जरूरत पड़ी। लुक एट टाटा कंसल्टेंसी, सेम स्टोरी। शुरू में बहुत नॉमिनल अमाउंट का 44 करोड़, 39 करोड़, कंसिडरिंग कि इसका नेटवर्थ इज 78,000 करोड़, 44 करोड़ आई थिंक इज एज गुड एज जीरो। You can hardly consider it any debt. Now, equity share capital 370 crores. Once again, it has almost doubled in 5 years. Reserves जो हैं इसके बीच बीच में कहीं कहीं पर कम भी हो रहे हैं. That means कि in some years it is not making profit. लेकिन it still has a very healthy net worth of almost 74,800 crores. Borrowings इसके zero है. Same reason. They do not need too much capital. What they need in terms of good human resources. अगर वो इनके ठीक हैं तो इसको और किसी चीज की जरूरत नहीं है। ऐसे ऐसे कंपनीज में जो सर्विस कंपनीज होंगे, दे विल हैव हाई इक्विटी, लो डेट और नो डेट। दीज आर आवर एग्जांपल्स। अब जो नेक्स्ट पार्ट है, कैलकुलेटिंग द कॉस्ट ऑफ कैपिटल, दिस इज समथिंग विच वी विल टेक अप in our class tomorrow. यहाँ पर we can stop our class here today. और so we have gone through dividends. We have made a start with cost of capital. कल हम लोग इसको आगे लेके चलते हैं, cost of capital. ठीक है? विवेक, दीप्ति, are you there?
Okay, sir.
हाँ, fine.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, sir.
हाँ, fine.
Yes,
Okay then. Good night. Good night to both of you. See you tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Good night.
good night, sir.